Welcome to 7 Minute Politics. I'm your host, Charlie McCauley, and today I'm just going to talk about my own personal political shift from red to blue. So here we go. Some of the earliest viewers of this YouTube channel asked me to do one episode just to explain how me, a pastor who grew up on a ranch in Texas, has shifted so far from a right-leaning conservative Republican to a progressive Democrat. So this is kind of going to be a real drinking from a fire hydrant show, because this whole idea, 7 Minute Politics, is 7 minutes where you go deep down in the links below. And this is going to be an example of a whole lot of topics in one of these mini episodes. So I hope you enjoy. Here is what I want to focus on. In politics, we're so often distracted by the political people and personalities, never more so than in the era of Donald Trump. And some might say, oh, have you shifted to be more liberal because you don't like Donald Trump? No, my shift has happened over decades as I've learned new information and learned about economic theory and racism, immigration, climate change, the things we're going to talk about. We're often distracted by these personalities, and all I want to talk about today is how I've changed my mind on the platforms and the policies themselves. I'm going to go over 9 different topics that have shifted me from red to blue. I want to start with the environment. I've done an episode on climate change if you want to check it out, but the science is clear. The science is closed. Our planet's in danger. I'm a person of faith, and this earth means a lot. Even if you're not a person of faith, it connects us together, this pale blue dot, and we're causing mass extinctions, and we're headed towards some very serious problems that will make all of these other issues pale in comparison if we don't make radical change. The Democratic Party is committed to climate science and ideas to make change so that we can, if there's any time left at all, see if we can save the planet. It's shifted me from red to blue. Uniquely, climate change is disproportionately harder on the poor of the world. So behind climate change, I want to talk about the poor or the world, or poverty. And in America, we have a huge problem, 42 million people who live in poverty. And for me, there's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans, no matter what they say, their policies are basically a war on the poor instead of a war on poverty. They basically are just looking at the symptoms instead of the causes. And basically every law, every vote that they do tries to strip away programs that help the least of these and hurting the most, and then to benefit the richest under this idea that it will somehow trickle down. Well, it hasn't. We become farther and farther apart, whereas the Democratic Party is committed to policies and platforms that help try to equalize and help those that are the hardest working Americans, which is the poor, and they often demonize them. Now, that idea of war brings me to the third thing, war and violence. One of the parties, the Republican Party, is funded massively by Halliburton and all the military industrial complex, and votes consistently to go to war and have a warring international policy, and has led us on the charge to Iraq, Korea. Along the way, this warring mentality and this military industrial complex and violence that I just can't stand behind, sending our young people to war every time just to fulfill these budgets that just keep increasing. Isn't just war, it's the violence of the death penalty, which I'm also against. This war and violence and death penalty thing, I just went from red to blue because I believe the Democratic policies lean more towards preserving life and protecting the most vulnerable among us. And that's because I'm pro-life, which brings me to abortion. Abortion is one of the main topics that made me shift from Republican to Democrat, and that doesn't make sense to most of the cultural dialogue that I grew up with, but I didn't understand that true pro-life policies prevent unwanted pregnancies, and that criminalizing abortion will not lower the abortion rate. The highest abortion rate countries in the world, abortion is illegal. That's not why people abort their babies. I don't like the morality of it, and I want to stop and save as many babies as possible. And I believe voting for Republicans will increase the abortion rate. That's a big one. You can check out the whole video I did on that below. But those same economic factors that can cause abortions brings me to the next one, economics. It's all about the economy, stupid, right? Well, I believe that the biggest problems in our economy, first of all, are economic inequality, the fact that the 1% or the tiny percent owns the massive amount of wealth in this country. It doesn't trickle down. And the hardest working Americans among us, those that are fighting for our lives as firefighters and nurses and teachers, are struggling and working harder than anyone, and they can't get ahead like CEOs or people with connections mostly through the Republican Party and bought off politicians. So I think the parties are very different there because their whole idea of tax codes and structures is those on the Democratic side for a more equal economy. Also, Republicans aren't actually conservative. It's under Republican administrations in the last several decades that our debt has skyrocketed as they continue to spend, as I mentioned above, on war and other things. The expenditures are absolutely incredible. Now, the economy is driven by labor, and one of the main sources of labor brings me to the next topic, immigration. There's 11 million undocumented immigrants, most of them who have been trapped here by our archaic immigration laws, and these are some of the best Americans among us. I know them, I serve them, I live with them. We're all immigrants. Unless you're an indigenous sibling of ours, you're an immigrant too, or a child or a descendant of an immigrant in this beautiful country. And one of our parties has gone so far extreme that they just demonize the immigrants, the DACAs, the dreamers, these hard workers, these families raising kids that just want to live the American dream. It made me go red to blue. I want to be a part of the party that sees the diversity of America as a really, really good thing. Now, our immigrants face this next topic, racism, along with all people of color. And to me, there's a huge gap in the two parties right now. Under Trumpism, the Republican Party has gone to just they refuse to condemn white supremacy. They criticize critical race theory. They don't believe that systemic racism exists, whereas the Democratic Party is committed to diversity. If you just look at the numbers of people of color in the House of Representatives in the Democratic and Republican Party, you can just see the commitment to ending racial injustices, which are many. The police brutality, Black Lives Matter, a weaponized police force, which brings me to the next one, the weapons and guns. Gun control. I can't stand that my own children are scared to go to school. They're terrified. I believe we can have reasonable measures to mitigate that, like we have car accidents and many other things. And the last one is healthcare. And I believe that Democrats have the right idea that healthcare is a human right, not a capitalist experiment. Everybody deserves to be taken care of. Those 9 things are the starting place for what has shifted me from the right to left policy-wise, and believe that in America, the Democratic Party is the best way to vote. If you like this, click subscribe, share it with somebody else, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.